Hello Year 12. This section of a course is going to be looking at the Quran, the nature of it, so how it was put together, the characteristics of it, so what's in it and how it's made up, and then an overview of how it's finally assembled and also how it's used and how it's treated as well. I'm going to take you through the PowerPoints, but before I do that, I was going to show you the Quran itself. It's interesting to have a look at in the book itself, but as we talk about it. Unlike the Bible, this is a recitation, so this is meant to be spoken. It was given to Muhammad by the angel Jibril while he was meditating in Mount Hira, and it was received over about 23 years in pieces. So it's an oral tradition. So Muhammad would speak it, he would talk about it, and then his followers would write down the surahs which he uttered. And it is held up as one of the finest pieces of work in kind of human history. Inside is divided up into surahs. So each of the chapters is called a surah. And as you go through it, they basically get shorter. All right, because they weren't sure which order to put them in, which one would be more important, which one's less important. And so you actually get the longer surahs right at the beginning, and then the shorter surahs kind of at the back. Okay, well, I'll take you through the PowerPoints now. So this section, you're going to be asked to write about what the Quran is, how it's been made up, its uses, and a bit of an overview of the holy text kind of as well. So some of the key terms you need to know about. Quran means direct word of God, and surah is a name for a chapter, so that's a part of the Quran. So the Quran isn't a normal book. It's got philosophy, it's got science, law, miracles, ethics, prophecy, poetry, and also a complete understanding of how to live. Because Muhammad wrote a lot of this or recited a lot of this while he was in Medina as well, it's about how to live. And so you've got developments on the 5 pillars, how to treat people, economics, all sorts of things. So let's look at some interesting facts about the Holy Quran. There's no real beginning, no middle, no end. It's not made up of like a story. It's made of these different surahs that were revealed to Muhammad in Mecca and Medina over a period of 23 years. There's 114 of these in total. Moses, Jesus, Muhammad are all mentioned kind of in there, and it's considered a miracle because it was given to Muhammad, and it's seen as the direct revelation or direct words of Allah. So it's seen as wrong to change it. So having it in Arabic is the correct way of doing it. And we'll talk about the problems of interpretation kind of later on in this video. So, as we know, Angel Jibril visited Muhammad while he was meditating in Mount Hira and was told to recite. This is the Arabic for Muhammad, because obviously you can't draw images of Muhammad. And he was told to recite 3 times. It's seen as a miracle because he was illiterate and he was unable to do that. When he received the Quran, we know that it took a huge kind of toll on him. And he was told to read in the name of the Lord, who has created you from a drop of blood. And this is in one of the first surahs in the Quran. And from this, we get the Quran starting to be transmitted, if you like. I put this slide in here to show you that the first bits where the Quran was recorded were on bones, bits of wood, anything Muhammad's close companions could find to write it on. Paper wasn't very common then, so you'd have shoulder blades of animals, leaves, all sorts of things the Quran would be written upon. So what is it? It teaches about Allah, it teaches about the end times, about judgment, talks about laws, ethics, morals, tells about stories, so the stories we've got from the Old Testament and the New Testament as well. We've got stories about what happened during Muhammad's life, and we've also got lots of criticisms about morality, polytheism, criticisms of the Jewish tribes and the early Christians as well. Some do criticise this view and actually say that probably Muhammad, because he was a trader and he would have come across Christians from Syria and the Jewish tribes as well, that's where he would have got a lot of the teachings from. That would also explain why there's differences in the understandings from the Quran to what happens in the Torah and what happens in the Bible as well. So I'll just talk a little bit about the characteristics of the Quran. So it's really difficult to do the Quran justice. Muslims do believe it is the actual phonic words of Allah. It is the truth and the final message from Allah to humanity It's eternal, and it's seen as a one true miracle of Islam. The text itself is seen as inherent, the word of Allah, and an exact copy of a heavenly version. And so that's why it's treated with kind of such respect. The way it's organised goes into this surah approach, and it's seen as very sort of stylistic as well. This all serves to reinforce its unique nature as a complete book of instruction and guidance for humanity. Its apparent lack of organisation is quite deliberate. Indeed, as John Esposito writes, many Muslims believe that the ordering of the chapters and verses was itself divinely inspired. The focus of every religious experience that Muhammad had was an exact and precise, and it was a message from Allah to humankind. It was not specific to Muhammad, and Muhammad was the vehicle, a servant who had totally submitted to the greatness of Allah and was optimally tuned to receive the divine command. The revelation was in Arabic, God's speech, according to Muslims, and was a sign from Allah, a manifestation of his creative power in the medium of language. So this slide just gives you some quotations and some examples that you can use to show how the Qur'an is a miracle, and also talks about the Qur'an's use of language. So some phrases were astounding to the Arabs. Muhammad could not read, he could not write, and he produced this fantastic sort of human achievement, poetry, the rhetoric of it, the language, the poetry. It's all quite a fantastic kind of key miracle in Islam. So what follows is a few slides in the PowerPoint kind of attached. These give you a nice kind of summary, first of all, of what we've kind of talked about. You can see how the Quran is kind of written from right to left on this side, and a few points about how it's kind of treated in the authority of the Holy Quran as well. You might be asked to talk about where it came from, the divine origins of the Quran. You might ask me to talk about the characteristics, how it's put together, what's inside it, how it's organised, and hopefully this has all kind of covered it. This last slide, we're going to come back to this, and this is going to be one of the questions that you'll have to kind of write about the Quran as a source of wisdom and authority and how it's used kind of in Islam as well. Okay.